Hey, it's Sam. I'm making this video to discuss something that's incredibly important about Vedic astrology understanding and study, and that is knowing the Indian concepts that precede all of the study and the techniques. See, one of the biggest problems is people start trying to learn how to make astrology work, often for themselves, so that they can avoid their own problems and things like that, which is fine. That's one way that we're supposed to, use it. But they forget that the most important part of their astrology scholarship is understanding not just the culture that it comes from, but the universal principles and wisdom that astrology is unfolding. So I say this because, in particular, you have a lot of Westerners and a lot of Western type of Indians or other people around the world. And I say Western types, I mean ones who are more materialistic in nature and less connected to the authentic spirituality. And they try to learn astrology, as I said, as a way to avoid difficulty, get the stuff we want, get the relationship, get the, as a way to get something to live a happier life. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, one of the first uses of astrology was to select auspicious times to do things. And it works very well for that. But the thing to understand even more, that's even more important, is the principles of Sanatana Dharma, the universal principles that began with the Vedas and then migrated down into other types of writing, such as the Upanishads, and then the other kinds of texts like the Puranas and the epics, of like Lord Krishna and Lord Rama, and then filter down into sciences. Now, there's a lot of crossover within that progression or that procession of teaching, but what is common through all of it is the philosophy of what's called Sanatana Dharma, the eternal truth. When we forget this Sanatana Dharma, and we start trying to jump right to the answer when we don't even understand the question, we create a lot of trouble, a lot of problem, and we misunderstand the text. This is why, in the ancient times, astrology wasn't taught to everyone. It was taught to the Brahmins and the learned people. Brahmins just means, in a modern sense, Brahmins means educated people. And I know there's still a Brahmin caste in India, still a Brahmin class in India that gets initiated with a thread and all of that. And then a lot of them grow up and want to be programmers like everybody else. So you have to evolve these things for the modern world, okay? The tradition of the Brahmins were the educated people that studied the sastras and specialized in different kinds of counseling, what we would call sort of counseling. And astrology was one of the things that they all learned a little bit of. They all were educated a little bit in that field as well. So the point being that it was only taught to those who also were taught things like the concepts of Sanatana Dharma, that we're spirit, everything descends from spirit and then takes form, and form is an expression of spirit. And these fundamental truths were built into everything that the educated people were taught. That includes things like, not forgetting that this one body, this one lifetime is not the entirety of who we are. You are not that hunk of meat walking around. You are not even those ideas in your head about how you think things are. There's a great chant, Shivoham, Shivoham, where we go through all the things that Lord Shiva, which is the substratum, the absolute consciousness, is not. And it says things like, I am not morality, I am not this, I am not any attributes, I'm not, sin or merit, I'm not death or rebirth, I'm beyond all of it. I am Shiva. What I'm saying to you, again, this might sound very abstract, but these things, when you try to study astrology and learn astrology and you're disconnected from Sanatana Dharma, from eternal truth, then again, you are grasping for something that you don't have the foundation to understand very well, and you can easily misunderstand even the most basic things. It's very easy to then get into this idea of, well, there are good things and bad things, punishments and rewards, carrots and sticks, do this, you get that, do this, you get that. And that sounds like what karma is. But that's just a very gross level of karma. Karma is simply the actions and how actions teach you. Karma is never wrong, you're never punished, there's no blame in any of it. Assessing blame to planets, assessing blame to other people, assessing blame to yourself, judging it, getting into all of that is a huge mistake. It's a mistake. And you're like, well, but what is astrology? That's what it is. It's showing us the good and the bad. Yes, it is, within that structure of karma. But again, when you understand what karma is, which is the way the universe shows us dharma, which is the truth, and how much truth we're actually living and how much truth we understand, then you realize that all the planets, everything is benevolent. That doesn't water down the certainty and the power of the lessons that you need to learn and the immediacy of learning them. That's why we incarnate. That's why we have a body, so that we will learn and will experience pleasure and pain very immediately, so that we can learn and evolve very quickly, because we tend to not learn and evolve in other realms very easily. So again, the point being, Dharma and Sanatana Dharma is eternal truth, the eternal truth that's everywhere. Karma, for instance, is how it's the matrix and the delivery method of Dharma. If you want to know the truth of anything, look at your actions and see how those actions come back to you. That's the truth of it. There's no judgment in it. It's not judging you. Someone saying you get what you deserve based on what you do is not a judgment. It's just a simple statement of fact. But for instance, again, it's very easy to confuse astrology when you don't understand, for instance, the lineage of teachings and how they filtered down from the Vedas into the Upanishads, into the different epics, and how those things became sciences. So I'm going to be doing some videos where I talk about this lineage and how to look at astrology in this context, where first, I'm going to first start talking about which astrological texts are, the most authoritative, and why, and the different sort of history of the Indian texts, because again, it's very important to understand all texts aren't the same. Some of them are written by rishis, which are divine scientists. Others were written by astrologers like me, but like in the Dark Ages or something. And there's nothing, it doesn't mean that you don't pay attention to them, but they're of a different level. And again, so this is another very important thing when you start to study astrology or any subject. What are you studying? Where are you getting your information? A lot of big problems now with, I don't know where people pull some of this stuff out. It is a science. It does work according to rules. And it's like, I talk to even astrologers, and they're like, oh, well, I heard to do this. I try this. And what do you think of that? Well, most of it, I think, is garbage, because there's no reason to do it. It's not in Brihat Parashara Horasastra or Jaimini Sutras, which are the two. Parashara is much more approachable because it's not written in a bewildering code. And there are things that are not in Parashara that you look at, especially when you do different kinds of astrology, which I'm going to talk about. But just extrapolating all kinds of, try this, try that thing, when it's disconnected from the foundational strength of astrology, again, unless you have a good reason to be doing that, it just shows that someone doesn't really get that there is a lineage, there's a history, and that this did come from rishis, from divine beings. Now, again, I'm also going to talk about, when I discuss Parashara, I'm going to talk about why that's a little tricky. Because you see the difference in Brihat Parashara Horasastra and other books very clearly, and it's based around the same things I'm telling you. I'll just foreshadow that a little bit, that in Parashara, he doesn't really explain anything. He doesn't really tell you how to use anything. He gives you the formulas and tells you what everything is, and if you don't know how to use it, that's too bad. Then you're not going to be able to do astrology. And again, I say this is just the way Brihat Parashara reads. This is why every credible astrologer that really looks into the text and is compared one against the next uses Parashara as the standard, because it's very different in that regard. And this is also why a lot of people who try to approach Vedic astrology from a scientifically correct point of view wind up getting frustrated with Parashara and going into other things that are simpler and that are easier, because, and again, especially with all the crossover with Western astrology and all these things that seem to make sense, but they actually fall apart once you get into applying like 10 or 15 or 20 of the simple, powerful things that you need to apply. It starts to break apart if you don't have a connection to Sanatana Dharma and understanding Indian thinking. And you try to approach Parashara, Horasastra, because it's all the power is built into understanding all those Vedic concepts. And again, these things are so much more important than to really understanding astrology and understanding yourself, because astrology is really the study of understanding how spirit takes form, not just you, but how you are an expression of that divine spirit. And you can't really approach that, you can't unravel that beyond just trying to figure yourself out or avoid all the problems by just picking up these little blips and blaps of stuff here and there, disconnected from this system and an organized procession through how it works. That's why I have a certification course, and I have I have more than 120 graduates now for the last several years, and I march them through that. The first module is all the history of Indian thinking and how it came from the Rig Veda to the Yajur Veda to the Atharva Veda, when we started to see astrology and Jyotish brought into that, then how these things turn into the Upanishads and Vedanta and the Sankhya philosophy, and then how that became the different sciences like formalized sciences like yoga, Ayurveda, Jyotish, how you see these principles reflected and portrayed in the lives of avatars through stories like the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, and the common thread of Sanatana Dharma that runs through all of it. Sanatana Dharma runs through all of it. And when you know this, then you understand why, Saturn is related to to Ravana in the Ramayana, but that doesn't mean this, even though he's portrayed as a bad one, that doesn't mean it's necessarily bad on some level. Like, again, I am good and I am bad. I am Shiva. I am beyond all of it. This is the eternal wisdom of Indian thinking. And so it takes a lot of intelligence, and it takes a lot, and the true sign of intelligence is the capacity to hold paradox. The capacity to hold paradox. If you're looking to just measure things by good and bad, right and wrong, yes, no, you said this, now it's that, and these simplistic boxes, you're never going to learn astrology very well, because it's much more complex than that. It's much more subtle and beautiful. Just like everything is mixed with irony. Everything that's terrible has a beauty to it. Everything that's beautiful has a sort of tragedy to it. Everything, the capacity to hold paradox is the true sign of intelligence, and it's something that you need to understand when you learn Sanatana Dharma and understand how the spirit has become form, how form is spirit, expressed as spirit, how the eternal is the momentary. Astrology shows all of this. Not just astrology, but all of Sanatana Dharma and Vedanta and Vedic thought. And again, when you're disconnected from all of that, then you're disconnected from the juice of what astrology is going to give you, and it's still interesting, but it's not rewarding. I use the analogy, it's like digging a bunch of little holes here and there, thinking that you're going to strike water at some point. If you want to strike water, you need to take all of that same energy, same amount of energy, by the way, and just keep digging deeply into the same hole, and eventually you hit water. But instead, I see students, they watch this video, watch this, do this, do this, do this. They have this sort of illusion of interaction, this illusion of knowledge by some kind of interaction through YouTube or Facebook, and like, oh, I know this. What about this? And they ask this real intelligent question that is really disconnected from the whole. It seems like it's intelligent, but you can tell that even if you give the answer, they're not going to understand the answer. So anyway, without getting into all that, I'm going to be talking about the history and the origin of the Indian text and the scriptures, especially the Vedic astrology scriptures, at least here at the beginning, so that you understand why we look at something like Parashara, how it's different than the other text, and the glory of the other text as well. And then I'm also going to be talking about how Sanatana Dharma and eternal truth and Indian thinking is woven into all of the astrology, and how you can really benefit from learning those things. So I'm also, I have a certification program. This is what's in the first module. Before we even start studying planet signs, houses, and all that, we learn this. Because without the knowledge of this, none of it makes sense. And with the knowledge of this, everything makes sense. So this is the thing to understand. And this is why I tell people, this is why so many people study astrology with me. It's not because they all become professional astrologers, although many of them do. But learning this and understanding this is the reason we're here. On Earth, by the way. So again, you're connecting with the divine stream of eternal wisdom when you study Jyotish, at least with me. And my certification course talks about this, starts with this whole thing first. So I'm going to be giving you a little idea of what that's like. So watch for some videos. I like to talk about this stuff and I like to share it.